Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Letters from Camp. Today we have a very special guest, the current program director of Camp Winoxet, Will Neville. Will, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Mike?
I am fantastic. I'm on summer break, so life could not be better.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right, so we like to start kind of just by getting people's history. What's your camp story? When did you first come? How many years did you do as a camper, staff, what areas do you work in, things like that.
Yeah. So my first year as a camper is in 2000, and I'm actually at my parents' house right now, and I found my camp photo from that Sunday, and it poured. We are all soaked.
Hmm.
So 2000, week 5 was my first time at camp. I stayed as a camper for a long time. I didn't CIT till I was 16 because I have a midsummer birthday and film on and whatever. So I CIT'd my 15, 16-year-old year. Then I went to Split Rock for a year as a den guide. When Split Rock closed that season, I came up for the last like 2 or 3 weeks to Winoxet, did some random whatever, kitchen, shooting sports. And then 18 was my first year full time at Winoxet. And I was immediately made into the assistant cope director. And that is the only program area I ever worked in, is cope and climbing for 7 years.
Interesting.
And then, yeah. And then after the summer of 2012, I took 3 years off and went and lived in New York for a while. And then in the summer of 2016, I came back uh, and I've been back ever since. So I've had like two 7 to 8 year stints, but not all together.
What was it like working in Cope? I know that's kind of a program that sometimes get hidden because it's up in the woods. So what are some things like that maybe people don't know about Cope?
I think my favorite thing about Cope is it's the one part of camp where the way I phrase it is you're not teaching, you're facilitating them learning. Like there's no lesson plans, there's no skills you have to master. You are just challenging them to try new things and work as a team. And it's really unique in that way. You're not teaching, you're facilitating a program where they get to grow and explore and learn as a group, but you're not leading them. I think that's my favorite part about Cope.
Yeah, and you're not doing like kind of the typical merit badge stuff like other
No, it's
areas.
these big long stints, and you don't have to get through anything if you don't think the group is ready. No one's going to be mad because someone got a partial in Cope, right? You can just say, no, we're not going to the high course. You guys can't work well together on the low course. You can just really work with a group at their speed and make the program customizable for them. When I right before I first started, it was a full day program, and it shifted to a half day program.
Mhm.
I think that within a year or two of me starting in that job, you'd actually probably know better than I would. Um,
You'd
and
think
I can't
so, yeah.
imagine doing it as a full day. Everyone, Mike was my program director at that time.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on was to kind of get people excited for the summer. So what are some things campers might have to look forward to this summer? Anything new going on?
Yeah. So a couple of the new things we're doing is we've revamped the what we call the youth leader or senior patrol leader slash crew president things because it really got dwindled down over the last couple of years to a quick like, all right, who wants to do flag and
Mhm.
when do you want to do it? But if you think about as troop size is reducing, the number of SPLs in camp actually accounts to about 10% of all campers, right? Because troops have 6 to 15 kids. So it's a really cool way to give that 10%, which is, a huge more than you'll get in most merit badges over the course of a summer, a cool experience and a chance to jump into a leadership role in a way that's safe and guarded, right? Because everything we give to those SPLs this year, the adult leaders are going to get two
Mhm.
as a safety net. So I'm excited for that because I think it'll give them a chance to grow into a leadership role because a lot of them are scouts that are becoming SPLs for the coming year.
Mhm.
So it gives them a way to grow into that in a safe way. We've revamped the crew program. As you know, we had a while there where crews would come up and would be like, well, we have COPE
Mhm.
or we have BSA Guard because we're a Scouts BSA camp. We're not a crew camp.
Mhm.
But we went through a pretty extensive review of crew requirements and figured out what we could offer effectively. So we're not ad hocing it.
Mhm.
Um, And besides that, those two things, which I think are the two new like programming things that I'm really excited about. Obviously, we're doing like a normal rotation of merit badges and new open programs, but
Mhm.
those are like the two big ones. And then a great new pigeon thrower for the shotgun range. It oscillates and spins and turns, and we'll make that program a lot more interesting and for older scouts. We'll still have the one that shoots the continuous arc for the
Mhm.
kids that are getting the hang of it, but we have ways to level up that program now, which I
Imagine
think is
that'll.
really cool.
Imagine a lot of the adult leaders will be excited about that too.
Yeah, yeah. The one that the shooting sports committee loves it.
Mhm.
So,
You mentioned Venture Cruise, and how have you seen kind of that program at camp kind of grow and change as we get more crews? Like how many crews do we have who come to camp this summer?
I think we have 3 to 4.
Mhm.
We have this challenge where we like those crews a lot, and then we tend to hire them all
Yeah.
because they're 16 to 19 years old. They're not our typical first year camper. As a first year camper, they're 15, and we go, oh,
Hmm.
and we tend to work with them more intimately, so we know them better rather than like a first year camper. I remember, I think it wasn't. I was your assistant, and we had a Jambo or something, and we hired a whole bunch of crew kids that like 3 years later were all of our area directors.
Hmm.
So yeah, we shoot ourselves in the foot, but I think we have 3 this year, which is good. With launching this new program, I don't think I'd want to launch it for 12.
Hmm.
Do a couple a week, but it's something that if it goes well, I'm really looking forward to doing more outreach with.
That's great. So in the past, a little two and a half decades or so, there's only been three people who've been program director. Why do you think that is? Do you feel like it's the best job in camp? What do you think is special about being a program director?
Um, I think why it is, I think it actually has more to do with the culture of camp and how we just keep people around forever. I had to go research at camp school this year, and I was either older than everyone by a decade or younger than everyone by 2.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think the consistency is like a uniquely us thing. It has less to do with the job and more with the culture of camp and how we have people stick around and the teachers that fuel our administration. I do think it's the best job in camp. Maybe the actual best job is assistant program director because it's more fun and less responsibility and almost the same job. But one of the things I really like about it is since I came back about 8 years ago, there were kids who were CITs that year who are now the waterfront director and the shotgun director. And you get to see that growth in a really cool way and get to guide that growth. I had a job interview and they asked me about program director. And I said, it's great because you get to take the ideas of area directors and staff members that are wild eyed and they don't know how to accomplish them. They say, I want to do this thing. And you get to help them shape it into reality without ever actually like being in it. And it gets them to see the fruits of their labor less than us. Like we made a pizza oven a few years ago and it was a hit and they loved it and they loved doing it every week.
Mm-hmm.
And all it took was for me to find the right kind of concrete, help them build it, make sure they have the ingredients. And it was a really cool program for the kids, but then also for the area to see, like, hey, we had this idea and we made it happen. I think that's my favorite part.
Yeah, I
What
think
was what was your favorite part?
my favorite part was just being able to walk the areas every day and just see what
Yeah,
was going on every place in camp. Because when you work in an area, like if you're the waterfront director, you're only on the waterfront. You don't see what's going on in nature or scoutcraft, things like that. So just being able to see all the different opportunities scouts had and all the cool programs, I think that was my favorite part.
yeah.
Um, are there parts of the job that maybe people don't realize you're responsible for?
I some of like I don't think they if they thought about it they'd probably realize it, but just like the things that always have to happen that nobody ever thinks about because they're not in the job.
Mm-hmm.
Like I am right now waiting on a call for Marine Patrol to make sure we can use our boats this year.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody thinks about that. They're not because the people who we know that own boats own personal boats, not because ours are commercial boats.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been arranging field trips with the art museum because If we just showed up with 20 kids without notice, it might work, but they'd hate us.
Hmm.
So I think it's the small logistical things that just have to happen that nobody.
Yeah.
I remember when I first got this job, somebody said, "Hey, have you called Brandon Morris to make sure he still wants to be the chaplain?" And it's Brandon Morris, and of course he does. But I went, "Oh wow, I really should. Oh boy, I messed that up," because it was like June. I called
Mhm.
him and very earnestly was like, "Hey, I know it's June and you probably have plans, but would you like to be the chaplain this year?"
Yeah,
So it's those small things.
you also develop a rhythm after a while where they're like, oh, it's Thursday at 4 o'clock. I need to make sure there's a truck to get the bikes for the triathlon, like stuff like that.
Yeah, I have in the boathouse a large sign-up sheet for all adults. Be like, those are the 37 things I need. Sunset Summit hikers. I need an engineer to go talk to people. I need X, Y, and Z. And tracking that stuff and the field trips. I don't remember what it was like under your tenure. I feel like it's grown, but
Hmm.
that just might be me because we send kids to the airport for aviation, the art
Hmm.
museum, the mountain, Kimball's, the fire department. We send out at least one group at every day.
Hmm.
Most days it's two.
That's definitely more.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned going to camp school and you met some other, program directors from going to other camps. I know we kind of had a little bit of fun texting back and forth about that.
Yeah.
And you kind of mentioned you could tell who was probably going to be successful and who wasn't. What do you think makes a good program director?
Um, so all week they were talking at camp school, they were talking about how the program director has to be like, you're the cheerleader, you're the loud one, you're the, and I think that's important, but I think it's like a C to D tier responsibility. It's like, no, you have to make sure they have supplies and you have to make sure that they're teaching it correctly, or else everybody's going to be mad at you and nobody's actually going to earn a badge. And all of these 20, a lot of these like 20 to 22-year-olds were excited to be the us when we were 19 to 22, which I totally get.
Hmm.
But there was like only some of them got like the depth to it, which the things that people don't see, the
Hmm.
calling Marine Patrol. And if you don't think about that, you can be the biggest cheerleader in the world. It's not gonna matter.
Hmm.
Right? It's all sizzle, no steak.
Hmm. Yeah, I remember getting knocked at camp school with my instructor because I have a switch and I can turn it on and be that guy, but most of the time it's
Mm-hmm.
off, you know what I mean? And I'm pretty reserved and low key and but I can
Yeah.
flip that switch and he was like, "No, you got to be like that all the time." And I was like, "No, you really don't."
These are really, if you don't have other people doing that, you have a massive problem.
Hmm.
Right? Like I have Nickel College, shotgun director, and I have Ethan Graham, the rifle director. Like I am too old for a 12-year-old to relate to it really well. They are not.
Hmm.
If you asked any 12 to 16-year-old their favorite staff member, which we do often at CIT and junior staff interviews, they're all going to know who the program director is. You are never going to be their favorite, and nor should you be.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into our lightning round. So we asked
Yeah.
everyone the same questions. Here we go. So what is your favorite camp song?
Uh, Ginganguli.
Classic.
But at the end of the slow and at the end of the campfire, and I'm in the minority on that.
Okay. How about your favorite camp skit?
I thought about this one when you said it to me, and I think I'm suffering from recency bias, right? Because camp songs, they've been the same for a very long time. The classics, camp skits change a lot more. I think, especially under you and I.
Hmm.
We had a rendition of the Invisible Bench a couple years ago, where a guy was like, "Oh, I have this invisible bench." And then they had an intervention for him and sent him to an asylum because there's no invisible bench, only to discover that there was, in fact, an invisible bench.
Nice.
Uh, Ryan Giffey cast and Frayed. It was excellent. And in recent memory, that's my favorite.
All right. How about your favorite camp meal?
My favorite camp meal is probably, oh man. Uh, I would have to say for a long time, the barbecue. I think there's something nice about it's partly the food, it's partly the atmosphere. It's nice to out of the 17 meals to do something a little different.
Yeah, especially when every week is or every 2 weeks are the same.
Yeah,
Does break it up.
totally.
How about your favorite place in camp?
I mean, everybody says Chapel Point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody says Chapel Point.
That has been the theme.
So uh, I would say from Chapel Point, but then the alt one is there's a spot in the low course at Cope where there's a little element called Little Putian Village. And there used to be, it's actually rotted now, a birch tree that fell and had made a perfect bench for the instructors. And I would sit there and get to watch the group. And, if it took them 20 minutes, great. If it took them an hour, I would have a place and it had a perfect vantage point of the element. I think just in terms of delivering program and being comfortable and being a thing that most people didn't know about, and I had all of those confluences.
And then thinking back, when you were younger, who was your kind of camp hero or staff member that you looked up to when you were a camper?
It's Charles Barry Skillen.
Nice.
It's Chuck, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know him, besides as a camper, and then he came back 4 or 5 years ago, and I was like, Mr. Skillen, I love you. And now we're friends and it's great. But when I first met him as an adult, I was like, that is Charles Barry Skillen.
Yeah, Charles is great. Definitely a lot of memories with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely is in the song skit enthusiasm Hall of Fame.
Yeah, absolutely. He was Brown Sea, which is so much more every first year camper, because that's how I knew Chuck when we did the Brown Sea overnight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember anybody but Chuck.
And thanks to him and Dan Burgoyne, those two really kind of put a refocus on Brown Sea as being one of the more important areas in camp. And so they really kind of revitalized that program, which is great. So, all right, well, thank you for your time. I'm sure everyone's looking forward to seeing you at camp this summer.
Yeah.
As an I.
I'm excited to be there.
All right, well, thank you for your time, and make sure you tune in to the next episode of Letters from Camp, and hopefully that will be recorded live from camp.
Oh, yeah. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for having me, Mike.